Hey guys, okay, so we are on our third day of learning about quadrilaterals. So here is your activating strategy. You know to pause me so that you can figure it out, and then we will work it out together. Alright, so let's look. We've got 3 apples. That one added together, they equal 30. We've got an apple. We've got 2 sets of bananas. So that 10 plus 2 things that equal 8 is 18. And then we've got a set of bananas minus 2 halves coconuts equals 2. And then that very bottom row is a coconut plus an apple plus a set of bananas. So let's look and see. Each apple equals 10. Each banana equals 1. So if we look at the first row, there's 4 bananas. So plus another set of 4 bananas. So that gave us our 8. And then if we look at the third row, we had 4 bananas minus 2 half coconuts. So 4 minus 2 equals 2. So each half of a coconut equals 1. So then in our bottom row, we have half of a coconut plus apple, but we only have 3 bananas this time. So that answer is 14. Okay, hopefully this didn't trick you and you were able to get 14. All right, so yesterday we talked more about quadrilaterals and classifying them using our hierarchy. Today we're just going to do that a little bit further. So let's go ahead and get started. Our learning target, again, is I can classify quadrilaterals in a hierarchy based on the properties of that category. So before we get started, let's go ahead and review our practice that we had yesterday, okay? So yesterday I gave you the homework page to practice. So let's look at it. Describe the attributes of the quadrilateral, then classify it based on its attributes. So at the top, we can see that there is a quadrilateral. We know it's a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. So what you should notice is that it has 4 equal or congruent sides, and it also has 4 right angles. So the only quadrilateral that has 4 right angles and it has 4 congruent sides is a square, okay? So this quadrilateral is a square. Let's look at our practice for number 1. Describe the attributes of each quadrilateral, then classify that quadrilateral, meaning name it. So we can see that this one has 1 set of parallel sides, just 1. These 2 lines are not parallel because if the trapezoid continues to go, they're going to, over time, intersect each other. So that is not a parallel line, parallel set of lines. So 1 pair of opposite sides is congruent. So these sides are congruent. That really doesn't make a difference. You can have a trapezoid that's a right trapezoid that doesn't have a congruent opposite sides. 1 pair of the sides is parallel, so just 1 set, and that's really what we're looking for to determine what this shape is, and it is a trapezoid. So this is the most important 1 pair of opposite parallel sides, okay? All right, let's look at the next one, number 2. You notice that this shape has 4 right angles, okay? It is also a quadrilateral. It's a parallelogram because it has 2 sets of parallel sides. So the only parallelogram that does not have 4 equal sides but has 4 right angles is a rectangle. Because there are 4 right angles and it has both sides are congruent. Opposite sides are congruent. Uh-oh. Should only do 1 tick mark there and 1 tick mark there. Okay, so opposite sides are congruent, which means it's parallel. It has 2 sets of parallel sides, and it has 4 right angles, so that makes it a rectangle. All right, let's look at number 3. You might be wondering why I only have 1 thing circled. Hopefully you only have square circled, okay? Circle the quadrilaterals that have all the attributes of a rectangle. So what does a rectangle have? Well, it is a parallelogram. So that means it has to have 2 sets of parallel sides, okay? So a rhombus has 2 sets of parallel sides. A parallelogram has 2 sets of parallel sides, but a trapezoid does not, okay? So that's just one attribute of a rectangle. The other attribute of a rectangle is it has to have 4 right angles. So a parallelogram does not have to have 4 right angles. So I can go ahead and cross that one out. A rhombus does not have to have 4 right angles. It just has to have equal sides. So it does not have the attributes of a rectangle. Well, let's go back and look at our square. A square is a parallelogram. It has 4 right angles. So a square is the only quadrilateral that has all the attributes of a rectangle. All right, let's flip it over to the back. For number 4, opposite sides, name all the quadrilaterals that have these given attributes. Opposite sides are parallel. So what if we look back at our hierarchy, it says opposite sides are parallel. So let's look. For a polygon, it doesn't have to have opposite parallel sides. For a quadrilateral, it doesn't have to because a kite doesn't have opposite parallel sides. A trapezoid has only one set of parallel sides. It does not have both as opposite, so that's only one set, so that would not be both as opposite parallel sides. A parallelogram has opposite parallel sides. A rhombus has opposite parallel sides because remember, when I'm going up, it is always. So a rhombus is always a parallelogram. A rectangle is always a parallelogram, and a square is always a parallelogram. So the 3 things that you should have, actually 4, parallelogram itself, should be parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, and square. Okay? Has 4 right angles. So let's go back and look at our hierarchy. None of these other shapes have to have 4 right angles except for a square and a rectangle. So for number 5, a rectangle and a square have 4 right angles. Okay, number 6, exactly 1. Okay, so has exactly 1 pair of parallel sides, and that would be a trapezoid. It only has 1 pair. Okay, number 7 says 4 congruent sides. So let's look back at our chart over here. Congruent means they have exactly the same. Well, a rectangle doesn't have 4 congruent, it has 2 sets. Okay, a square has 4 congruent sides, and a rhombus has 4 congruent sides. So the only 2 should be rhombus and square for number 7. All right, number 8 says, write a real-world problem that involves classifying a quadrilateral, then solve the problem. So here's a sample. What type of quadrilateral can be used to describe the shape of a computer screen? Well, for the most part, it would be rectangular, right? There's not very many square computer screens, but it would probably be a rectangle, okay? All right, so fill in the blank with the correct term or number to complete each sentence. A rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. And you should know that because of our hierarchy, a rectangle has 4 right angles, okay? Number 10, a trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. And again, it has to have at least 1 set or 1 pair of parallel sides to be a trapezoid, okay? All right, number 11, which statement about the figure shown below is true? Well, let's look. K and N are rectangles. Well, N is not a rectangle because it does not have right angles. It does not have 4 right angles, so that cannot be true. Figures L and N are quadrilaterals. Well, L is a triangle, so that cannot be true. It is not a quadrilateral. It only has 3 sides. Okay? K and N are parallelograms. K is a rectangle, and a rectangle is a parallelogram. N is a parallelogram, so it is a parallelogram. So that one is true. And let's look at the last one. M and N are parallelograms. M is not a parallelogram because it is a trapezoid. It only has 1 set of parallel sides, and that would be the top line and that bottom line that are parallel to each other. So that one also would not work. Okay, hopefully you did a really good job on this and you're starting to understand how the hierarchy works. Today we are going to review the hierarchy one last time. Hopefully you have these written down, or you have put them into memory. A lot of these words are 4th grade words, so that should be pretty easy. All right, so again, we're going to start at the top of our hierarchy, and I'm actually going to draw it on the board today. So our first part of our hierarchy is polygons. Oh, and my marker's not working. Let me switch markers. There we go. Polygons. Okay, so what is a polygon? A polygon is any shape that is closed and has at least 3 sides and 3 angles. In this case, we're going to be talking about quadrilateral. So I'm just going to draw a quadrilateral around polygon. I drew a rectangle. It doesn't matter. It could be a trapezoid. It could be a kite that I put around it. It is a polygon, okay? So next I have quadrilaterals. And a quadrilateral, to be a quadrilateral, all it has to have is 4 sides. Okay, so is this a quadrilateral? Yes, it is. It did not intersect itself. It does not have curved lines. It is a quadrilateral. Okay, so that is a quadrilateral. All right, so next, if I have a quadrilateral, then that means I can classify any other shape that is a quadrilateral, and I'm going to go over here with my kite. Okay, so here I have a kite, and a kite just has to have congruent adjacent sides, okay, and opposite congruent angles. So these 2 angles would be congruent to each other, and these 2 angles would be congruent to each other, okay? All right, so I've got my quadrilateral, I've got my kite over here. So another type of quadrilateral is a trapezoid. And to be a trapezoid, remember, all I have to have is 1 set of parallel sides. Now, if you notice, I actually drew a right trapezoid here. Why? Because it's still a trapezoid. It has 1 set of parallel sides here. These 2 lines are not parallel. If this one were to keep going and this one were to keep going, over time that line would intersect this line. But these 2 lines run parallel and they will never intersect. This also has 1 set of parallel sides, so this is a trapezoid. Okay, and if you remember that definition, at least 1 set of parallel sides, okay? So next I'm going to draw a parallelogram. Okay, so a parallelogram has 2 sets of parallel sides. So this side is parallel, these sides are parallel, okay? And then I've got some different quadrilaterals that are also parallelograms, like a rhombus. And to be a rhombus, all you have to have is 4 congruent sides, okay? And be a parallelogram. So it has 2 sets that are parallel, and it has 4 congruent sides, okay? Another parallelogram is a rectangle. In a rectangle, to be a rectangle, you have to have 4 right angles. Okay? And then our last parallelogram that we're going to talk about is a square. And to be a square, you have to have 2 specific things that other parallelograms both have, but they only have 1 of them. So you have to have 4 right angles like a rectangle, and you have to have 4 congruent sides like a rhombus. Remember, if I am going up in my hierarchy, it is always, okay? So a square is always a rhombus, but a rhombus is not always a square. Okay, a square is always a rectangle because it has 4 right angles, but a rectangle is not a square because it does not have 4 equal sides. Okay, so remember that as you're going through your assignment today. So your assignment today is prodigy. Enjoy it. You have 20 questions.